Hello, my name is Funk McLovin. Welcome to Homestuck Rewritten, a podcast about a hypothetical... Sorry, my cat sneezed. Bless you. Hello, my name is Funk McLovin. Are you okay? Hello, my name is Funk McLovin. Welcome to Homestuck Rewritten, a podcast about a hypothetical AU fanfiction me and three friends are thinking about writing. My cat's still sneezing. I'm sorry, everybody. This week, we're going to talk about, continue to talk about Act 6 pre-Retcon. We're going to do cleanup on some topics that we didn't cover in the last couple episodes. And next episode, we're going to cover the Retcon. And, yeah, so enjoy. Last time we ended, we were discussing sort of Act 6.3 to 6.5. We left some things off that we'll clean up right now. We basically left off right before the beta kids and the trolls enter the alpha session. And this is the part where it sort of leads up to game over the first time. We changed a lot of stuff, but we left a lot of stuff hanging, so I'll just give a recap of what we're going to talk about this time. Basically, broadly, we're going to talk about this session's combining and her Imperious Cool-Descension making some money moves, imprisoning Roxy, stuff like that. Grimbark and Crocker tier for Jane and Jade, which I think we all have heavy fixes for, which are going to be good. And this will give us more... There's fewer things in this part, so it'll give us more time to sort of discuss what we can change. But very broadly, this is like the time... The Act 6 was very long-winded, but this is what it has been leading to. A lot of setup has been going towards this. A lot of boring shit was before this. But this is where Act 6, in my opinion, starts, and this is where things start to happen that are as interesting as they once were in Act 5 after a significant amount of downtime introducing the alpha kids. We can start with I guess we can start with the central figure to this, which is her Imperious Cool-Descension, who we haven't really talked about yet. What do you guys think of HIC as like the alpha kids' Dur's big bad? We could start from left to right here.
Okay. I think that the Condes is an interesting character, and I think that she is an important character, but I think there are some issues that need to be addressed in, as far as rewriting her from the canon betrayal. One of them is aesthetic, because the Condes as is has this kind of like...
She's a minstrel character?
Yeah, like...
She literally has big pink lips and, like, jet black skin. It is not... It's literally a racist depiction.
It's a more modern take, but it's
not great. And, like, I don't know or care to what extent that was intentional or not, because it doesn't matter. I think that's one thing where, like, we want to change visuals just to make her look different than that. Like, I think there's the whole weird thing with, like, the adult trolls get really dark skin and then it becomes flat black. And it's like, that's a stylistic decision, not
that has
a
some
thing
connotations that I think we can... everyone in the audience is smart enough to pick up on. But.
I've seen a couple fan fiction justifications where they said it was because their skin turned into a chitinous shell, so it hardened. But I don't think that the trolls literally turn into insects or carapaceans.
That doesn't mean it turns black
when they become adults.
Yeah, no, that whole thing is like again, it kind of goes back to the discussion we were having about like troll gender and some of the other discussions we've had about like world building and stuff, it's like the world building serves the story, so like why? Like we're basically rewriting this. We don't have to include it and then try to think of a justification for it. So one of the things I would do is to change the design of the contest a little bit. Personally, I would basically use the design of like kind of a Mina Pfeffery hybrid, but like bigger and older and more imposing. Because like I do like the contest. Like I think that she is important. I think that when we do the ancestors, like talking about how she sort of like became who she is sort of important, and like she's very important to Alternia. She sort of represents the last bastion of the Alternian Empire, and trying to like recreate or continue that imperialist power. So like she's another one of the angles or one of the aspects of the narrative and the concept of control. So like, yeah, generally speaking, I would keep her. I don't even think I would change all that much about her like characterization. It's mostly like aesthetics at this point.
Yeah, and I feel comfortable saying the Condes's aesthetics should change because her characterization is so flimsy as it is. It's very hard to argue. You'd have a very hard time arguing that, like, you could probably argue this for Mina, but for the Condes, it's just kind of not even an archetype, just a stereotype of like how it was basically Ave of the time that Hussey was, I use this in a literal sense, appropriating to make the queen of a race speak, which is like, I talked about this before, but it's part of his weird thing where he likes to like reverse societal roles for no purpose other than like to
Wouldn't
say,
it be
like, isn't this
fucked up if
interesting?
straight people were persecuted instead of gay people? What if it was illegal for straight people to love?
Yeah, that kind of
Alright,
thing.
that's a YA novel premise, I guess, dude.
It sure is. Yeah, and if you asked him, he'd probably not realize that consciously, but that is what's going on. So having the Condes be someone who, instead of being this caricature of a very dated concept of some kind of weird stereotype, instead it could be more regal, more queenly, but also sort of still mean, sassy, and with a personal stake in everything. Because really what goes unexplored in canon is the very tragic aspect of Condi, of the actual oppression of the narrative and by Lord English and Doc Scratch that she is facing, and her incredible pain at being like taken away from her species. That's not to take away her, implied war crimes across the fucking galaxy and like all that shit she's done, but it would make her more interesting, in my opinion, if you included those nuggets of like, hey, my whole race is dead. I would like to restart them, and I would do anything to do that, including very, very evil things. You don't really see that's implied in Canon Holmes. Like, that is her motivation, but you never see any of her stuff. All she does is like say funny things to Roxy and stuff like that.
So one of the themes that we've been playing with in the rewrite is this concept of like the inevitability of like this predestination of what everything has to be like, and the idea that like the Alternian Empire is part of that. The Alternian Empire will always exist. The Empress wants to recreate it. She wants to remake this big empire that she's lost because of the reckoning, the meteors. So it's like that's something that I think kind of fits in nicely with the theming of all the other situations where they've got characters that kind of represent the same thing. And the other thing is it's kind of a contrast, and I think Act 6 does this in canon, but that's probably going to be more obvious the way we're doing it in the rewrite, is that you've got the the whole quest to make a new universe, you have the sort of like developing plot of trying to break away from the narrative, and now you've got the contrasting goal of like just recreating Alternia. So it's like, let's just do the same thing that we were doing as opposed to trying to make a new thing. So you've got these two kind of like conflicting ends of the same general spectrum of like freedom versus this like, oppression. And I think that's effective, and I like that, generally speaking.
I think that Condi would have liked Alternia how it was, because obviously she was on the top of it. And then Bucky, what are your thoughts on the condos?
Part of me is thinking about Ender's Game, and I guess this is like spoilers for the entire 1978 novel. It's been out long enough, I'd say. I mixed feelings about this novel, because the first novel is pretty good, and then the later novels get more into the Mormon proselytizing and like retcon some details that like didn't make sense in the first book, which I think was a bad move on Orson Scott Card's part. But the point is that it's about child soldiers. It's about an intergalactic war. I think some of what it was talking about is sort of relevant to the original Homestuck, at least, because it's talking about this kid is conscripted basically at age 6, and because he's like monitored for like military proclivity when he's like 6, and then he like kicks a boy to death in the opening scene. And there's this weird metaphor about how like he needs to be tough enough to like actually be a military leader, and there's commentary from the adult military people that are functionally grooming this child, and I read this book over and over when I was a child, so I don't know what that did to me, but towards the end of the novel, Ender for a while, Ender's been like exploring this sort of computer-generated setting, like game that he does on his like fleeting spare time at the Space Military Academy, and it starts building this landscape, and he travels through it, and then sort of like off the end of what was pre-programmed, and there was more, and it started showing up in his dreams. And then he does a bunch of advanced war games that are like a bunch of tests of his skill, and they're very tense, and at the end of it they tell him at the end of the very last test they have for him, everybody like breaks down crying, and he's like, holy shit, what happened? Why is everybody so upset or like excited, or what's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, we didn't tell you because it was kind of fucked up that we were having a kid do this, but you were directing actual military endeavors, and we just won the war against the in the original 1978 or 77 publication, they're named after a slur for gay men, but the thing that what's gone within the movies and the more recent adaptations, they're called the Formics. But we've defeated the Formic forces. You wiped them all out with that last battle. Like, thanks for being our star military tactician. And he's like, huh, that's fucked up. I'm gonna be fucked up about that for the rest of my life. And then he was. But there's sort of the relevant bit is that there's sort of a resolution, and that the dreams he'd been having were like a psychic connection with the last queen of the Formic people. And as it turns out, they're all hive minds. So they were unaware that killing humans was killing individual souls, because only the queens basically have individual souls. So Ender's like, so we fought that war, and you guys had no idea that you were killing us? And she was basically like, yup. He's like, cool, so you just found that out? And she was like, yup. And he was like, that's great. I'm gonna try to figure out what to do with you, since you can repopulate that species, but humanity probably wouldn't be super happy about that. So he ends up traveling at light speed a bunch and traveling around to trying to find a place to like raise the queen, and that is literally an entire separate novel. I think it's several different novels. And I haven't even touched his fucking siblings because there's like other metaphorical shit going on. But basically, the queen in that situation, the last queen in that situation who's left without any of her cohorts is like sort of a force for hope in a way, but it's very difficult to it's difficult to untangle what Orson Scott Card is talking about from like that there's something definitely Christian going on there. The reason I bring it up is because, like, I think that the opposite of that is sort of what's going on here. We don't have, like, an innocent child in a position of power. We have somebody who's, like, who has done imperialistic conquest and has done it for a very long time and was very good at it, in her opinion. And
she's not sorry. That's the important thing.
And she's not sorry about it. And I think
she's like happy about it. She's like, I did a cool war. I won. It was awesome. I want it back.
And maybe there is a little bit more to say around like the desperate actions that dictators take when they like don't have like there was something there to the fact that she did try to recreate Alternia, and it failed spectacularly for a variety of reasons. Like, the biology wasn't right, and she had to, like, build robots that were like drones, and she, like, wiped out parts of the human population trying to turn them into trolls. Like, some of that is interesting. I think, like, it could be, like, it's horrifying, but it's interesting backdrop. It's interesting to, like, explore what dictatorship and imperialism does when it's trying to, like, it's losing ground fast. But, like, the revolution always felt very... Homestuck talks about revolution a lot without really talking about revolution. It doesn't commit to anything, and its revolutions always fail. The Alpha, Dave, and Rose in the original iteration die, and like we know that they die and fail to prevent the situation that Dirk and Roxy are in. And not only that, they knew the difference between Dirk and Roxy and the Alpha, Dave, and Rose and the Sufferer was that the Sufferer did not know that he was going to fail. He could probably have guessed, but damn if he wasn't going to try anyways. Dave and Rose knew they were going to fail because they knew that their kids were 400 years in the future and that they'd be alone. I think all of that is not very constructive, to be quite honest, because it's left hanging. We just have these continual revolutions that fail, and the message is sort of that, like, imperialism is inevitable, and there is no other choice but to succumb to entropy. Because think about what keeps happening. The planet is destroyed. The planet of the players is destroyed when Suburb happens, and they go on to create a new universe. But like, it's like death and rebirth, and I don't think that's quite right. But we still have to end up creating a new universe. But I think, I don't know, you have to resolve, you can't just go, and they all lived happily ever after because they were gods, the end. You have to resolve what the fuck happens in that new world somehow. So what I like is to sort of reinforce and start to follow through on some of those themes, and maybe have the revolutionaries not be aware that they're going to fail until, like, very close to the end, so that we can see, like, they almost won, and that can sort of carry you forward into the place where they do actually succeed. Because everything at the end will finally come together. You finally have Alpha, Dave, and Rose couldn't pull off what they were doing because they were fighting a losing war against somebody with far too much technology, and they didn't really have powers. They had weird shit going on, but they didn't really have, like, Suburb powers. And then, before that, the Sufferer was facing a similar, like... The Sufferer and the Summoner both faced large-scale imperialistic forces. I've been reading a lot of dystopian fiction lately, and I'm just, like, really interested in actually seeing, like... What ideology what ideology did Alpha, Dave, and Rose have? What ideology did the Summoner and the Sufferer have? They were all fighting revolutions, but for what? The Alpha, Dave, and Rose were petite bourgeoisie. Like, what? It's
Explicitly, yeah.
fighting a grand scale war against an alien invader is one thing, but what interest do two people who are making a lot of money have in defeating, in taking down the current imperialist regime? Because the Betty Crocker Empire has been, pun sort of intended, baked in for a while. So, like, what... I think Alpha, Dave, and Rose need a little bit of a rework as revolutionaries, in my opinion. I don't think that they would have that much money. I've been rambling for a while, so I'll, like, cede the floor to, like, other notes, but yeah.
I have a thought about this. I do like that. Developing a revolutionary sentiment, I think, is wonderful, because it really would give them something to do other than just the she's evil, so they have to stop her. Because in a lot of thought experiments, there's this idea of a just war, and what goes unexamined in those kind of thought experiments or stories with a quote-unquote just war is, what is a just war? Like, there is no examination of the morals in Homestuck. They just accept that the Condis is bad. And what I think is interesting about the revolution thing is revolution could be the theme of the alpha session. Like, what I think is interesting and goes unexplored in original Homestuck is Condi's plan is to finish the game, just like the kids want. Her goal is the same. She wants to recreate the game. She's having everyone do their normal thing, and she plans to take over the planet afterwards. And I think if you leaned into that, if you said, okay, these people like Doc Scratch, these people like the Condis, they want to take over our new planet. We have to stop them. And they are the power structure. They are the Black Queen. They are the first guardian of Alternia. They are these people. Lord English is someone who we have to fight against on an ideological level. So making revolution the goal of the alpha session would be, I think, in step with what we've talked about going forward.
Couple of things. One, I think it would still be interesting if we kept some of the original theming of, like, the nobles and the stagnation, but instead it's sort of like there is no ideological core to the Alpha's revolution, because they're still kind of waiting for the people who they're hoping to inspire them to show up. And, like, they're stagnating, but partially they're stagnating because, like, they explicitly do not really have direction against the contest. They have anger, and they have reason, but they don't have, like, organization or motivation. And that's something that, like, early 20-somethings who want to do something about the state, the declining state of, like, I was gonna say revolution, but the environment that they're in, but not really knowing what to do about it, I think is a pretty good, I think is a topic that you could cover right now, where, like, they're, at this moment that we're discussing, where sort of the betas sort of arrive, you see this, like, shattering of mythology, where, like, the betas are not coming to save everything, per se. They are here to do something, but they're not super-powered beings who will have every answer for what's to come, and they're going... We know that they're going to succeed because we want them to succeed in the story, but the manner in which they succeed won't go perfectly.
Yeah. Okay, I get that. I like this. This is...
Oh, and the other thing I was going to say was that I think GCat as the first Guardian was a waste, and I think that we could do something better.
Yes. I think it's fine that GCat gets taken over by Condi. That's very emblematic of, like, okay, she's taking over the session. She's taking over the Guardian. I think that's fine. But, like, GCat never did anything except some, like, random shenanigans. What were you gonna say about the revolution stuff, Janaya?
Yeah. So I was gonna say that I think so. One of the things that you one of the things you do have to take into account is the fact that you are building this story into the core story of Homestuck. So like you're going on a little bit of a detour to talk about the Alpha timeline and you've got the Alpha kids, you've got the ancestors, you've got all the shit that's happening on. You have this period where you do have some like a beat in this story where you can kind of talk about what the hell's going on in this other version of Earth. But you don't really have unless you want to like dramatically expand the scope of this part of the story, you're not necessarily going to be able to dig into like the revolution as like a separate outside of the plot entity. Like the thing is you have all of this background. You have all of this stuff about the Condes and the Empire and what that means and all that shit and how the characters fit into it. And like you're probably not going to go completely down that road, but what I was going to say is I think you can take those ideas and I like the idea that you're dealing with these like now they're like 20-something-year-olds who, you know, they want to do something. They know that this is wrong. They're just not sure what that they can do. And the idea that they're like kind of waiting for this inspiration. They're sort of like this is how people in the real world are with the shit that's fucked up in our actual world. Like we are, you know, a lot of us are waiting for like some kind of like something we can do. And, you know, these are characters that are now given like things that they can actually do to try to make things different. So the other thing I was going to say is that I think it's important to make it really clear that the problem, the core problem, isn't Alternia. It's not Doc Scratch. It's not, you know, the old, you know, Earth Empire. It's not the Beforean Empire. The problem is these kind of systems that exist. And the ultimate goal of all of the kids and all of the trolls is to create a world where those systems have been completely dismantled. They don't exist in any way, shape, or form. And I think that you have the opportunity, and I know we're not doing Ancestors today, we're going to get to it. I think you have the opportunity to use the Ancestors as a way to show that these systems are inherently bad. You know, they inherently are impressive, even if they are quote unquote, you know, the nice version. So like you've got this like you have a different manifestation of the Empire on this, you know, Alpha Earth versus Alternia. You have a different version of it in Beta Earth with, you know, the American Empire. You have a different version of it on Alternia and before us. And like I think that it's good to show that everybody's ultimate goal, the thing that they realize is to do whatever they can to break away from that and, you know, get rid of it. It's not about like making a better version of it or fixing it. It's about, you know, completely subverting it. And I think this is another opportunity you have to do that. Like I do think that the mom and the whatever the Alpha Roxy Mama Lalon stuff and all that is like, yeah, they are kind of like, they're not, I wouldn't say they're bourgeois, but they're like fucking, you know, labor aristocracy, kind of like, they're up there in a way that feels a little weird and sort of off. So maybe not do that. Maybe give them a little bit more like, you know, revolutionary sentiment and a little bit more like working class type coding and less we're loaded, got lots of money. Like, because Bucky's right, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense that they would like, you know, it's the idea of the principled rich person, you know, the person who realizes that they need to use their wealth to help others, but they get to keep their wealth. They definitely get to keep their wealth. And like that's yeah, exactly. The philanthropist archetype. And I don't like that. I would prefer we don't include that in our story.
Philanthropy doesn't do anything. It's nothing but PR. Like, they don't ever give away substantial amounts of money.
Right,
and, like,
exactly.
we know... The thing about Alpha, Dave, and Rose is that their wealth is accumulated specifically so they will be able to hoard resources for Dirk and Roxy to survive, which is it's not bad, but what it's saying is, like, they knew the end of the world was coming, and they prepared for the arrival of the two children that would create a new world later, and that's all well and good, but, like, to some extent you are also abandoning the world as it was, and, like...
Yeah.
Yes, it's inevitable, but, like, that just, it's... We've been trying to move away from these children are exceptional and fundamentally different from other human beings idea.
I think that there's probably a couple ways that we could deal with that, because, like, the way it is in the original is very, like, you know, these are the new people that start the new world, and, like, I think that either having their survival be more of, like, a, you know, again, I guess kind of that narrative inevitability. It's kind of like the stuff with Gamzee, where it's like it happens because it has to happen, and, like, that is something that the story demands, and, like, maybe have the parents be aware of this to some degree. I don't know, maybe include GCAT in there some way. Hey, you're right, he didn't do shit. Like, to have something where it's like this is kind of like it's representative of the idea that this is all inevitable, and then, like, you know, they're going to be, along with all the others, working to subvert that once we join the sessions together and start to fight back against all this stuff. I guess the other thing we could do is to have more people have survived and actually have, like, a group of people in the end. I don't know if you want to go in that direction, but that is a thing we can do.
I think that would be... There is a... I know it's suspension of disbelief, but are you fucking with me that literally Dirk raised himself from infancy? Like,
yeah, that was a little weird.
Roxy could have plausibly have been taken care of by Carapacians, but, like, that... It doesn't make any sense that there wouldn't be... I think it actually makes more sense for Alpha, Dave, and Rose to also have been dropped off 400 years in the future, but still 30 or whatever years behind, 20 years behind Dirk and Roxy, because then you can do something like... you can still have, like, the last vestiges of humanity, like, hanging on the skyscrapers that stick out of a flooded Houston, or, like, maybe I don't know if it's that, like, Rose Lalonde had enough money to reinforce the Lalonde mansion, so it, like, it remained as much as, like, parts of the Appalachian Mountains, maybe, or like, whatever the fuck is up near Canada, are, like, high enough that they didn't get flooded during this global flooding. Like, I don't think that we get quite full water world in this scenario, I guess. But, like, there's humans surviving, and, like, 1 year, 2 meteors hit near those two settlements, and 20 years later, it happens again. And, like, that way you can have, like... You can still have Dirk and Roxy were raised in a fundamentally weirder and wilder situation, and maybe they find and access technology. But, like, quite frankly, if like, again, going with the theme of, like, they are not different than other humans. They might have been created in... There was always this mythologizing of, like, the Homestuck kids are different than humans because they were grown in test tubes. They don't have belly buttons because they were grown in test tubes. Are they weird and, like, not quite human? Are they oddly separate from other humans? And, like, I don't like that anymore. It always sort of... It was unsettling, and I guess part of that was kind of the point, but also, like, if it's a story about friends on the internet, I think they should remain human.
Yeah.
Or as human as...
Yeah, that's a good point. if they are test tube babies, then they are something fundamentally different than a human as we know them. Maybe not species-wise, but certainly in
All right,
terms
Brave
of...
New World already covered that, though.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea, actually, is changing the circumstances of Dirk and Roxy to be... Because what I remember of the Condes's revolution on Earth, not revolution, but takeover of Earth, is the killing of the humans was kind of incidental. She didn't really mean to. She was just, like, doing what she thought would be cool. Hey, this is Future JoJo. At this part of the recording, Janai and Bucky had to go deal with something. I think what they said to me was that, like, Vriska, quote-unquote, got loose. So we skip ahead a little bit because we got distracted. So that's why I suddenly changed subjects right now. Haha. Here's a fart sound effect. Yeah. The next topic of discussion I suppose we'll talk about is, because we talked, this is all good stuff, the Condes and the Revolution and the broad strokes. We talked last time about some of the stuff just in the broad sense that we can skip over, I think, like the Spade Slick stuff, some of the Cherub stuff, we basically covered that. So the last two things now are the House Juju and how that sets up game over later, and also Grimbark and Crocker tier and what we think of that. We've talked, let's start with Grimbark and Crocker tier because we've talked in the past episodes about how we were thinking of having Grimbark be something that was not mind-controlled into Jade, that was sort of festering in her, that the Condes exploited instead of just a mind control thing. Because in my opinion, mind control is just weak.
It's a cop-out a lot of times.
Like, mind control as a concept seems very hand-wavy, and if there's one thing we want to avoid, it's being hand-wavy. So we can start with that rift that opens up. Now, my question is, how does it happen? How is it set up? And how is Crocker tier different? We can start this time from the other side, because Bucky, I know you are a Jane fan, and Jane is heavily involved in this as well. Well, I guess you know, Janai is a Jade fan, so, but we'll start with Bucky anyway.
Okay, so I don't think that the brainwashing with Jane is like in the... I forget exactly what we said about it. I do think that Jane being like brainwashed into being a good corporate drone is like lazy, because people actively choose to do that. She wants to be in that position of power because she wants to be, not because she's been subtly brainwashed into it. I think that's kind of bunk. It really takes the onus of responsibility off rich people, which, like, I don't feel the need to do that. But I do think the idea that, like, I don't know, computer-based corruption is interesting, and I do like that. I don't know how I would want to approach it, though, because maybe it's that the tiara top is something that she alchemizes, and it contains mind control powers because it's like got a part of Betty Crocker and what was used to alchemize it, and the Condes can tap into that. But I think I agree that just the explicit mind control can be kind of cheap.
I was gonna say, I think that in that case, because like having it be, something that has some level of influence over Jane, but she's also making a decision to, like, because I think, like, in this rewrite, we're going way heavier into she is a person who's raised in this privilege to see it as being normal. You know, I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's the kind of person that believes in, like, the benevolent CEO that can make things better with their good capitalism, you know, a green capitalist kind of person. And I think that, like, having it be something where she's sort of, like, allows it in to some extent, like it's a combination of, it's something insidious that does, like, get inside her head, but it's also something where she's like, okay, this is how I make things better in the end. by making the nicer corporation, the nicer empire. And then she realizes that that's a lie and that she can't do that and that no one can do that. That's part of her arc. But I think like having it be sort of like the way of fulfilling this promise, like it's the seductive call of, well, if you have the money, then you can make things better because you're the good capitalist. And like, I think that Jane ultimately is the kind of person that's like, I think that she is ultimately a pretty decent person, but she's also a person that's been raised in this very toxic environment and has internalized it deeply. So this is kind of almost more of a representation of her internalization of something rather than just like, oh yeah, she's mind controlled, because that does feel super cheap and kind of lazy.
I think it'd be, what I think is more interesting. So we've got the game over rewind. She sides with the Condess in the game over timeline. She chooses it.
I like that.
I think that would make sense, actually, because not in a... I think if she did, which she probably would, it would be in a very misguided way, like this is all I've known through my whole life. This is like my surrogate grandmother. I have to do this. Like, you guys suck.
Betty Crocker wanted her to play that game.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. I think that she would do that, thinking that she could.
This is the
inevitable.
This is the mommy issues. This is the mommy issues.
Yes, this is the mommy issues.
Mommy issue alarm.
She can't say no to mom.
The mommy issues are stored in the tiara top.
Yep.
And the tiara top could be like this. Instead of being a mind control device, it could be like a power-up that Jane likes, that Jane enjoys using, that Jane's been maybe leaning on for the whole
instead of the lollipop,
arc.
Because we've decided that that's sort of bullshit.
Yes.
Yeah, that is bullshit. Like it represents the way that power looks appealing in the sense of like, this will give you the ability to make change, to make things better in the way that you think they need to be. And like, then when we loop back around for the game over retcon, having it be that she gets to understand that, one, that's not how that works, and two, her definition of making things better is heavily biased.
So heavy spoilers for the last couple seasons of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. If you haven't seen that, get on it. Jane in this moment is Glimmer. She is Glimmer struggling with Shadow Weaver, tempting her with dark magic. And like...
Yes.
Precisely.
Yeah, she's getting the power to make the world a better place.
If Shadow Weaver, fused with Horde Prime, you'd get the Condess to an extent. You'd get somewhere in the realm of what we're shooting for. And...
Because much like Shadow Weaver, the Condess does not internalize her own evilness. She's like, I'm doing this because, this is the best thing for me. And Shadow Weaver is the same.
Right up until the end, she's like, I'm making a noble sacrifice. It's like, no, you aren't, you shithead. You're getting out of your fucking consequences.
Right, exactly. And, I think that would be really good. It also reinforces the generational aspects of this whole thing, which, has strong parallels to how actual power structures perpetuate, because they aren't based in... it isn't like every time a new billionaire arises, they claw their way up from nothing and then they get to be the billionaire. These are things that are built generationally and passed down, from parents to children, to grandchildren and so on and so forth. So I think that makes a very deliberate statement about that. Jane is the next person in line.
All she's ever wanted has been the approval of Betty Crocker to say, yes, you are worthy of being the successor to the Crocker Corporation. So,
yes.
That in the initial game over run, it would make sense if she chooses to side with Betty Crocker and with the Condess, and that choice is what tips her over into, full corruption. And then part of what changes in the retcon is that, We'll get to it however we end up working it. We need to get back to something domino ping pong, so like somebody gets through to her at some point and she doubts just enough to not choose. I don't think that she's fully recovered, but she just doubts enough to not make that choice, and that has a huge impact on the amount of influence the contest has over the session.
Well, it's the idea that you're like, it's not always a giant, grand thing that tips the scales. It can be a person making one different choice. And like for her to choose to walk away, like ultimately walk away from that offer instead of leaning into it, is like that is the thing that allows her to go on a different path where she recovers from that. Like, I don't think that this is something she just gets better from instantly. I think this is a long process, but like she makes the choice to start that process rather than not to.
I agree. What I think would be interesting, what would be for a lot of, I don't think she should lose that desire of wanting to take over the contest. I think that desire is actually very useful and very productive, because in the end, her friends could say, like, you can take over Betty Crocker. Like, you can have your little fucking baking company, my friend, but you have to kill this bitch first. Something like that.
I wouldn't do that, because like it soft sells like the problem. And it's like, well, you like, okay, you don't have to do the worst thing, but you can be like the second worst, and that's still okay. Like, I know that's not literally what you're saying, but like I would rather see Jane be able to eventually turn away from that path completely. Like, it's not the promise of like,
that makes sense,
being part of the petit bourgeois that sways her. It's like genuinely realizing that she, like, one of the things I always found sort of like grating about the way Epilogue's Jane is portrayed is that, like, at the end of the day, like, when you really dig into her soul, Jane cares about her friends. And like she's like, in our rewrite, she is deeply traumatized, she is deeply like indoctrinated into this very bad system of doing things, and she is, deeply misguided, but she still cares about people, she still cares about her friends. And I think that like having her like go in that direction would be good. Like, I think that life is an interesting aspect here, because like on one hand you've got like kind of like the idea of the systems, and on the other end of things you've got like the idea of like caring about people as a whole. And I think that like you see aspects of that with both Fefri, Mina, and Jane. So yeah, I think that you could do something really interesting with that.
Hey folks, it's Future JoJo again. There's another awkward segue in the audio because Cronus Ampera, the real one, hacked our computer and got into the chat. So here's like a little intermission. Next we talk about Act 6 some more, but for your listening pleasure, here's the sound of a nude man running across a concrete floor. There you go. Here's the podcast. Well, we talked about Jane, so why don't we talk about Jade? Buggy had some good Jane thoughts, especially concerning the Crocker tier, with how that would square with the Condess and her new mommy issues that we're giving her. If you heard me giggling in between your guys' comments, it wasn't because I thought they were funny. It was because I thought of Jane like watching videos of Lady Dimitrescu and buying a PS4 so she could play Resident Evil 8.
Oh my god.
That's why I was chuckling, because there's those memes that are going around from Lady D's voice actress like saying meme things, which I think is very funny.
Jane is upset that she doesn't say this in the game.
Yeah. I thought I bought this game. She goes back to GameStop. I bought this game under the impression that it would feature Lady Dimitrescu for at least half of the runtime. She was the first boss of the first dungeon. This is atrocious. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
All right, so Jade. Do we talk about? Because I have thoughts about Grimbark and Jade. So in the original, again, we've got Grimbark is kind of like it's another one of these like mind control-y things that I don't love, and then like we'll talk about how Jade comes out of Grimbark in one of the other episodes because I have thoughts about that too. But like just as far as what Grimbark represents and like what it should represent is like. In canon, it represents mind control, just like a different version of mind control, and I don't like that. It feels lazy and stupid. But so we've been setting Jade up as this kind of like character that's very like concerned for her friends. She wants to get out of this system of oppression. She's the kind of like source of hope for the group, like genuine hope, not aspect hope bullshit. And she provides this kind of like alternative path through to just like banging their heads against the way things are supposed to be over and over again. And I think that one of the things that so we've talked about characters that are like Jane is kind of like accepting the system in the sense of like I can make it better from like by being in charge of it. We've got characters that are kind of like powerless against it, or they're trying to like find some power within it. I think that Jade and Grimbark should represent what happens when you just fall into the rage against the way things are. Like it represents this like incoherent anger at the system without any ideology to guide you or like make things better or get you to do anything positive. Like you just hate things and you want to tear everything down. And the thing about that is it's in real life and in the Grimbark world, it is something that can very easily be redirected. So like I think it puts Jade into a situation where she is very like susceptible to like, oh, well, actually it's your friends that are the ones that are causing this to happen. Like it's that rage that's so like blinding that you are willing to just like do violence without really like stopping to think it through. And like this is something that Jade like this is bad for Jade. Like this is like Grimdark for Rose. It's a and I would like it to resemble Grimdark more because Grimdark is that kind of like falling into the anger at the system and allowing these other powers to take over. Because you're so mad at things. And I think Grimbark is kind of like that, except it comes from inside of her, where it's like she is so angry and so full of rage that she just like decides like, fuck it, I'm going to tear this thing apart and I'm going to do it myself. And the problem with that is that isn't a good solution either. And like it's her losing sight of her, like that core of hope and like we'll work together and do this thing as a group and make things better. And then when she comes out on the other side of that, it's about her like rediscovering that. But I think that portraying it as, you know, the result of the hopeless rage at the system, you know, eating you up inside and poisoning you is more effective than it just being mind control. So again, it's not her completely losing herself and being controlled. It's her like becoming susceptible to a bad way of doing things because you know, she has this very legitimate anger, but the problem with that is you can take legitimate anger.
Yeah, let Jade be pissed off.
Yeah, and the problem with that is you can get pissed off, but then if you just like start swinging at everything you see, that's not going to help anything. And that's what Jade is doing as Grimbark. That would be my take on it. I'm interested to hear y'all's thoughts on it, though.
No, I've got no notes because that basically aligns with I was thinking, which is. This is something that Jade falls into, just like Rose, just like now Jane. It is something that she is like, maybe has been festering inside of her, because right now she's just kind of passive after Act 5, which pisses me off because I don't like that. And And so having her be like, man, I wish I could just be of some use. I wish XYZ. And then, you know, she meets the Condesce, and the Condesce is like, hey, you want to fuck shit up?
Right, like she's already becoming angry, and like she, you know, we've made her less passive, but she's still like, she knows that this is messed up. She knows that this whole system is bad, and she's becoming angrier and angrier, and then like the Condesce manipulates that.
She could mistake the Condesce as a revolutionary figure, much like, you know, we in real life, or not we, but people in real life realize. Because what I'm thinking is, Jane and Jade could use the line of like, she's just trying to get the game done just like we are. I don't get why you guys are so fucking pissed off at the Condesce. And, you know, some of the characters could buy into this in some respect, but everyone else would mainly stay the same. I think that some, like, the more impressionable characters like Dave or Jake, no offense, boy likers, I think those more impressionable characters could be like, well, geez, they have a point. But then, you know, people like June or Kanaya or Rose would be like, no, you fucking idiot. Like, we want to finish the game, but we don't want to finish it in order to, like, make more tyranny.
Right.
and Jake could make some line like, well, she promised not to anymore. Or some bullshit like that.
I think
I like that.
Yeah, I think Jade does, like, Jade is, at her heart, someone that tries to see the best in people. And so, like, I think a combination of that and just, like, falling into this anger at the system itself is like, I think that there are ways you could write the Condesce manipulating that once she's far gone enough that she isn't thinking clearly. Like, you know, the Condesce tells her that she's trying to get rid of Scratch or get rid of Lord English, and this is the way to do it. That kind of thing.
Like, Condi plays Palpatine to her. She's like, yes, enjoy your anger, stuff like that. Do you guys have anything else to say about those two?
I mean, I think you kind of nailed what was missing from her character. Like, instead of being listless, she takes action. Instead of, like, sort of, like, having every reason to be pissed off and then getting to succumb to it, I think is interesting. I think it really fulfills that, like, it's not girl bossing because it's not, like, shallow and hollow, but, like, having a fucked up girl, I think should be allowed in a way where it, like, actually means something. Otherwise, the original was kind of shallow and meaningless, and I don't know, it didn't do much, and I would like to fix that.
Yeah. I think that, like, because there's the whole, like, oh, I feel like one of the things that people can say about these kind of rewrite projects is like, oh, you're just trying to, like, make everything, you know, you're trying to make everything, like, woobified, or you're trying to do a fix-it-fit kind of thing. And it's like, I don't think that you have to have, like, every character is always triumphant. I think that's a boring story. And, like, I like the idea of the, you know, these women that get to be, like, they do get to be a little fucked up, but then they also get to come out on the other side of it. And, like, and for some, that's not a thing that happens. Like, I don't think we're gonna have Arania becoming, like, you know, great on the other end of things. I think Arania is an example of how you can fall into that and, like, not come out. We'll talk about Arania when we do Dancestors, but, like, I think that having, like,
that
Rose...
is confirmed now. The Dancestors episode.
Yeah, Dancestors episode is coming soon. But having, like, having Rose with Grimdark, having Jade with Grimbark, having Crocketeer, Jane, where they and Vriska, like, everything with Vriska, like, your characters that are succumbing to bad things for various reasons. I think reasons we've made more compelling and more interesting than just mind control. But, like, they also get to, like, recover from that on the other end of things, and they get to, like, process what they've been through and start to heal, because, like, yeah, I don't love the idea that just, like, everybody that is traumatized is destroyed by it. That's not... No one likes that, except weird chuds.
The final thing that we haven't talked about yet with these, like, pre-retcon acts is the inciting incident for the retcon, which is Vriska finding the house juju. And that whole event, I think, merits its own analysis, because that is kind of one of the cornerstone moments in late Homestuck where it's June following Vriska into that cave. First, refusing to give her the Ring of Life because his opinion of her has changed. Second, she finds the Juju. And third, he being John, but June in the rewrite, obviously, finds the Juju and uses it and gains control of these Retcon powers. Basically, changing the rules of time travel, but it's not actually time travel technically, even though, like, he's now able to change the past.
Yeah. Well, he's able to, or she's able to change the narrative itself. Like,
yes.
I think it's very important in our rewrite to make a very strong distinction. Like, I think that distinction was there in the comic, but it wasn't always super clear.
And so, what I think is interesting about that, personally, is in the narrative of Homestuck, it is something different from time travel, but in a meta sense, the you and me perspective, the reader perspective, it is just time travel. And so distinguishing the difference is enormous.
Yeah,
because
I think so.
Otherwise it is just going to read like what we've been seeing before with a different rule set. So, yeah, what do you got?
I think that one of the things to do might be, other than, I think there's two things that you need to do to make it, to really sell it as a different thing. One of them is to establish that the game over timeline is it. Like, that's the only outcome that can happen at this point. I don't know if maybe, like, adding something with Dave or something like that. I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead to game over stuff, but, like, maybe having something where, you know, Dave comments on, like, trying to use time travel to fix it and not being able to do that or something. The other thing is, I think, presentational, like, presenting the retcon abilities in a way that is distinctly different from time travel, like having it be weird in a way that is like, because Homestuck plays around with meta narrative shit, but not always very effectively. I think this would be the time to absolutely break the fourth wall in order to establish that this is something real different. Like, have the author, not hussy, but like the generic force of the author, like saying something and June is perceiving it for a moment and like realizes what's happening. And then having the presentation of the retcon be like, this is literally rewriting the story. Like, I would even, like, rather than having it be the, and I know I'm jumping way the fuck ahead, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to do it because I came up with an idea in my brain. Instead of having like the bit where June is like jumping back and you see like the arms and it's like changing panels, I would portray it as like you're jumping to moments and you see like the script being edited. So you see like behind the scenes of the comic itself, you know, changing.
It's a video of me writing it.
it just cuts to you like typing. Well, having like,
hey,
images of like the manuscripts with like the redlining and stuff like that, where you're actually like you're really selling the idea that this is a complete. And I'm doing it in a subtle enough way that it's not like beating you over the head with it, but like I think this is one case where being too subtle is maybe not a good thing because it makes it look like time travel and it's not. So I don't know. Those are my brief thoughts, which we can expand on when we do game over. But like, yeah.
Punky, what are your thoughts on the sort of retcon in general?
I
want to know.
Wish that Terezi didn't have to orchestrate the whole thing. Yeah. I think that's a lot to put on one person. Like, it seems like at the end of Game Over, I think it makes more sense if at the very least you have a couple of people collaborating on, like, I don't know. I think what you could do is you don't have to show exactly what they talk about, because that spoils what's coming, and I think it'd be more fun. But you sort of like pan through, like Terezi sort of is like, I had a vision, and here's what I think we should do, and then June's like, wait, why though? And Roxy's like, yeah, I have to agree, why though? Just because, like, Roxy's still mischievous, even though she's sort of, like, a little broken up. And then you sort of, like, fade to black, and then June's like, alright, I'm gonna go. And Terezi's like, alright, cough, that's as much as I could explain, cough. And, they're like, oh yeah, I think we figured out what we need to do. And, like, I think at the very least, like, having a couple of people collaborating on it, with like putting their heads together, and really, like, you've got roughly similar things happen where everything goes to shit and the only people that survive are Terezi, June, and Roxy. Honestly, I think that's good, because you've got the leader of the beta session, the Dark Horse leader of the alpha session, because I still think that characterization is true, and then you've got somebody who was sort of like really the only person who had their shit together strategically, or at least so she thought, from the trolls. Whether or not that's true depends on whether or not you think that, whether or not you believe Terezi to an extent, right. I think.
Whether you consider Terezi a reliable narrator of those things.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be interesting to have, like, when Terezi is explaining what they need to do, and, like, I do agree that, like, less, like, you know, less show or tell, and more just, like, vague implication before you get into the meat of it. But to have it be that, like, Terezi doesn't quite understand what she's seeing, because it's something that's so, like, foreign to her experience. Like, this is not... This is the concept of, like, rewriting reality itself, and maybe, like, you know, that's not something that a seer can, like, necessarily process super great. Like, to have it be, like, vague, or, like, she can't quite figure out what the fuck it means, but she knows that June has to do something.
You know what always sort of came out of nowhere for me in the actual final battle was the combination of god tier powers to do things in combat.
Yeah.
I think this is a good spot to establish, like, the first time we see characters combine their god tier powers to help, it's when June and Roxy, like, very hesitantly but slowly and surely help Terezi, like, de-obfuscate whatever is going on with her visions by combining Breath's clearing power and Roxy's ability to steal obfuscation with Terezi's vision.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Just so that, like, it's not all on Terezi.
Right. At
the very least. And also, and, like, again, I just think the Framo tips. The Framo tips were really cool. One, as cool as much as Sburb is totally a video game, there's always, like, passive abilities that some of these combinations would do, such as whatever the fuck that combination is going to help Terezi out with. And second of all, like, if that's possible, why does it only show up once?
Yeah. I like that. That's a good idea. Like, to have it be that, you know, Terezi can't figure it out by herself. Also, it reinforces the idea that you need a community of people in order to accomplish things. Like, it's not about the one special person. Like, even though June has these abilities, she needs the help of other people in order to utilize them. And even though Terezi has the ability to see a lot, she can't make sense of it without the help of other people. Like, I think that those are, like, it reinforces the idea that, like, this is a group effort, and it's not just the one chosen hero. It's a bunch of people that are all working together to fill in for each other's weaknesses and whatnot.
Yeah. I like that. I've said before, my thesis is Homestuck is one of the only retcons that the narrative tries to earn, and I think that that's pretty admirable on its own from Homestuck. It's just a pity that the changes that they made sucked ass and only served to like bring Vriska back and solve everything for them, I think that sucks. I also think that I totally agree that it shouldn't just be Terezi, because that reads to me like okay, fix this, here's how you fix it. Very Deus Ex Machina in a way. Like, I think that what you guys said was good, because like it should be something that they have to figure out, because they are exploiting the game now. They're not just exploiting the game, they're exploiting the game of Paradox Space. And this is like, it should be very clear that this is a moment of like, we need to change shit. This is the only time ever we've been able to change shit, because like the world just ends here. That's it.
Yeah.
And we can't let that happen.
It is the end of the timeline. They're the only alternatives are to either accept game over and have it, kill everyone, or to change the entirety of the narrative structure that led to this point. And also now this is the first time they're taking the narrative away from scratch, is the other thing.
So the explanation is that there are morale issues to the certain extent that people have lost like sight of what the goal is, or there are certain moments where people should be encouraged to progress rather than kill, or see growth and a new way forward rather than like stagnation. So, and because we have a representative from each of the sessions, we have somebody who's noticed key moments from each of the timelines.
Ooh, yeah.
So Roxy can say, wait, when Jane chose to go with the Condesce, that's when things really started to break bad, because Jade started to lose hope and everything sort of started to collapse. And then they sort of work backwards from there.
Yeah. Oh shit, that's...
But we get this explanation as June is reaching to change the moments.
Yeah.
But they sort of unfold that there's these key... I do really like the choice that June shows up and punches Vriska in the face. I think Vriska surviving... I don't know if that means that Vriska survives entirely, but that particular moment of like, of course there was a third choice. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just not stab her in the back or stab her in the back. Of course there was another option to just like incapacitate her so she couldn't leave. But like that, the consequences of that, maybe Vriska does still get stabbed in the back later by Terezi, and that's still something she's wrestling with. But, and like, maybe Vriska really does die, but, if we wanted, but I think that moment actually was a pretty good instance of, like, what breath means, so I think changing that particular instance might actually, or changing that was changed might actually go against what Homestuck does to an extent.
Yeah, I really like that idea of the fact that, like, because you've got kind of these 3 session representatives, and I would have it be that at one point June has another, like, prompts another conversation with Jade or something like that, where like, because we've already got conversations about, like, them bonding and like the discussions of like having this kind of like essentiality of hope. But to have a conversation with Jade about like that rage and what that means at some point, to have a conversation with Jane about like all of this shit with a Condesce, to like get all these characters to think just enough of a difference to make that one choice and not fall into the thing, or to be able to break out of it, I guess is the thing. Not to just not do it in the first place, but to be able to recover. And then for the trolls, I would save Vriska, but like change how she is presented afterwards, like a lot. Like have it be that this is the start of the choice that leads to the equivalent to like parentheses Vriska, where she does the same, like she starts to do the same kind of self-reflection that's required to get there, and like this prompting of like, oh shit, I almost killed a bunch of people, and maybe I actually feel bad about that for once. Like Vriska is not a person that's like, she's not a person that feels bad about killing people, but she is the person that has the capacity to feel bad about killing people. And I think, like, you know, getting all of her friends killed is maybe, like, a thing that she would perhaps think twice about. And, like, the idea that the alternative originally was for a woman that she cares deeply about to kill her, and how, you know, how much that messes Terezi up. Because yeah, she has this guilt, and I think that would help to put Vriska on a path towards like actual character growth, and avoid making her into like the best and special character that fixes everything, which is kind of how she is in canon. And I don't like that, because it's like kind of eliminates her character growth, and then she leads the fucking ghost army and all that shit, and it's like, you know, I don't know. I would handle that all differently and have Vriska be less of a heroic figure, because I feel like Vriska's ultimate journey is to realize that isn't good for her.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's all pretty badass. I really enjoy I like the idea of keeping even some of the more controversial things, because my hot take is like some of these things can be good. They just were shittily executed. That I think covers most of the cleanup that we were going to do from the last episode. After this, we'll talk about the retcon. But to close things out, because this was a cleanup, but we got some pretty good time, like doing some extra stuff, talking about Ender's Game and how that pertains to Condi. I think that's great. It makes me feel like we're doing an actual podcast and not just like a shit post. However,
I feel like we crossed that bridge a while ago, but
yes. To round things out, do you guys have any? Because there's really two parts of Act 6, which are the pre-retcon and then the retcon and post-retcon part. Do you guys have anything to say about Act 6 pre-retcon before we move on to the rest of the comic? I will start with what I have to say, and that is, I just wish that in all this fucking downtime, they had something to do, even if it's just exposition. Because as it stands, this part of Homestuck is like the single worst part. It's a slog. That's all I got.
I feel like the changes we're making are they're going to actually provide a lot of meat to this story, and like a lot more like emotional complexity, even more so than earlier on in the rewrite. Like now we've gotten to the point where the characters have really developed as people, and you've come to know them as characters. So now we can start to do shit like dealing with more nuanced aspects, like the shit with the Grimbark and Krogertier, and like what that means, and dealing with Vriska's bullshit, and like characters that are complicated, but we are able to like deal with that complication because now we've had time to sit with the characters and get to know them, and like establish the structure of the world and all of that, which I think is good, because it does. I like Act 6 a lot, but it does bog down a bunch, and it doesn't do everything super great. So I think that we have a stronger narrative here.
Yeah. What about you, Bucky? What do you have to say about the pre-retcon Act 6 before we put the fucking nail in the coffin?
I like Lil Seb.
All right. Yeah, he's a bunny. He's a bunny boy. Fuck cat boys and dog boys. I want a bunny boy.
I just like that Dirk built a cantankerous little robot that like gets up to mischief, that like Jane sort of has to deal with.
That is good. That is very good.
I don't know, I'd like more of that. I think that was cute the couple of times it showed up early on, because it was just like they were just good friends, and that was just sweet. Like, I think having something for them to do, I think, could be along the lines of, like, to some extent they are still friends, and, like, I think it'd be more interesting to see for more, if we're abridging what's going on, it makes way more sense to, like, for the structure of Act 6 to sort of be that, like, we've gotten these characters and we get a bit of introduction to them before they start the game, but, like, we sort of get, like, up front we get sort of what they're pretending to be, and then here we get sort of the like, their relationships falling apart, because I think it's pretty, you can set up their dynamic and then, like, how that quickly, like, doesn't work and falls apart when they're all, like, when there's no society left and all that's left is to focus on their relationship issues. And so,
they
like,
don't live in a society. They're living the dream. That's great.
Yeah. And potentially one of the things that we could, like, just sprinkle in here for... I was gonna say me personally, but I think Janaya also has some sort of vested interest in this, maybe, is, Jane Roxy. I would like more of that to be built up, at the very least. Like, I think what sort of happens is that, like, maybe one of the moments that Roxy chooses to change is a moment she chickened out on, like, confessing to Jane, and, like, and maybe potentially what the change that, like, makes Jane stop and go, like, wait, why do I want this, is when she's like, but I like Roxy.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, fuck it. I like cotton candy. Cotton candy's a
Cotton
good
candy. I think that
fuck it, let's do it.
I think that cotton candy would be fun if it happened.
Yeah.
In the comic.
Imagine.
Yes. That would be nice.
I think that shipping, I think, should be an episode to itself in some respects after we're done with all this. Because, like, we're probably going to piss some people off with the ships. Because, like...
I don't care.
I don't
no,
care.
No, we should not care. But I still think there should be... If we're going to fucking commit to shit, we should commit to the ships in some respects and develop those in some way. Because the one thing that Homestuck does that really pisses me off is the same thing that every fucking YA grandiose story does. It's the will they won't they bullshit. It's the anime that never commits to a couple. It's the it's I hate that. Just make someone fucking canon and then let the people at least know where they stand. Because one of my least favorite arguments on HS Twitter is, like, are these people actually in a ship? Like, were Vriska and Terezi actually dating discourse makes me want to tear my hair out.
It's annoying and bad, and it doesn't serve any good purpose. And, like, yeah, it's fine to have characters that are in, you know, complicated relationships or relationships that go back and forth or take a long time to develop. None of this is bad. But to have it just be eternally mired in the quagmire of never saying anything sucks. And, like, I feel like there are certain character relationships that sort of, like, make sense. And, like this thing that we're just talking about now, where, like, part of the thing that kind of, like, brings Jane back from the edge is, like, oh shit, there's, like, one specific person that cares about me that I also like, that's not, like, I know the cliche of, like, you know, your true love saving you. Don't worry, listeners. I am aware of standard literary cliches, but also, by the same token, there are times where you do something differently because you care about a person. That's a real thing that happens, and I think it would be neat to have it happen. Perhaps. Yeah. Like, just like the heartfelt conversation between June and Jade about, like, Jade's anger could be something that, like, brings her back from allows her to come back from Grimbark. And it's like, yeah, that would be cool. Actually, like, commit to something instead of being fucking waffling about it forever and ever.
I don't know. Like I said, I think we've squeezed all the fucking blood from the stone that we can from this dumb part of this stupid webcomic that no one likes.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm excited for next week because we are going to be covering the Dancestors with a special bonus episode.
Yeah.
Also, I should clarify something real quick. Bonus episode in this context will mean an episode that we will release normally. It will just mean that we're not covering something directly from the like a direct like story beat. We'll just be talking about something in a general manner with a special guest. So I thought about releasing them on my Patreon, but since this is a collaborative effort, I don't feel comfortable with that. So we're just going to release them on YouTube.
And by bonus episode, we mean normal episode.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Just, you know, it's an artificial word to get you more excited about it. So if it works, it works. There you go.
Get hyped for the bonus
A lot of
episodes.
people commented on the recent episode, which we also talked about, like a Dancestor episode. People were like, "I need that," which surprised me because I didn't know people even gave a shit about those creeps.
Oh, I have many thoughts about the Dancestors.
Yes. They don't dance enough. Like, when do they dance?
That is not one of my thoughts about the Dancestors.
But yeah, let's round this episode out.
Hell yeah.
With a goodbye. I don't have anything else. Bye, everybody.
Fuck it. Bye.
Roll the outro. Rewriting Homestuck is a podcast by JoJo McLovin, Janiyah Riley, and Bucky Grant, hosted and produced by me, JoJo. Please follow the links in the description to each collaborator's Twitter and subscribe on YouTube. I'd like to thank my patrons for this month: Pyrate, Zipperozic, Kaleidoscope Mediator, Luna Skywalker Tucker, and Jojro. My Patreon can be found at patreon.com/funkmclovin. Have a great day.